My name is Roddie Shanley, and I am 58 years old. I'm from Pasco, Washington. I have 7 children and 14 grandchildren, and which I adore and I have so much fun with. And I love to CrossFit. I'm in recovery. I have my own business, and I work full time. So I have my plate full, but I love it.
What do you think people's first impression of you is?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. I think that it's probably my silver hair. That's the first thing that somebody who doesn't know me often mentions is my silver hair, and that it's very pretty. And that's usually a conversation starter about how I made that transition from going from, dark hair to gray, and why I did that, and how it turned out. And so that's kind of the conversation starter. But I think people's first impression of me would be, I feel like I'm pretty open. I feel like I'm a pretty open person. And so I think people feel comfortable around me pretty much right away.
Awesome. So tell me about the hair transition you just mentioned. So you said it was a story and you talked about how you decided to do that. So let's talk about it.
Well, it's been probably about 4 years ago now. I started going gray when I was about 18 years old. And of course, that was completely unacceptable. So until I was in my early 50s, I just continued to live in dark hair. And I finally got to the point where it was just, honestly, I couldn't afford to keep doing it. And so I'm like, well, why don't I just grow it out and see what happens? I don't have any idea what color my hair even is. I don't know how it's going to look, if it's going to look terrible. Worst case scenario, I hate it and I go back to dark for a while. And I had long hair about your height, about yours at the time. And so I'm like, oh, how am I going to do this? So it was kind of a nightmare because the gal that did my hair at the time, she just turned it yellow, like bleached it out because it was super dark. She bleached it as close as she could get it to gray, and it was just this brassy yellow stuff that I looked like I don't even know. My kids just died when I showed it to them. So I'm like, okay, now what am I going to do? So I got it all cut off, and I pretty much started over. And then I've just worn it short ever since. And it was kind of a transition period in my life of accepting my age and being comfortable with it. And one of the surprises for me personally that came out of that experience was I didn't really think that I cared all that much about my appearance. And what I realized is I kind of did. And it was a really hard transition, accepting that I was white. My hair was white. That meant I was old. And so it was a fun time, and it was actually a really good discovery journey. And I got to know a lot about myself, and I ended up just really embracing it and really loving it.
So you mentioned in your intro being in recovery. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about that if you don't mind.
I started my recovery journey about 3.5 years ago. I got to a place in my life where I realized that I had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and I was abusing it as a way to cope with one of my son's addictions and trying to navigate that with him, which sounds crazy, but that's kind of the way that unfolded. And so I realized that I needed to go a different direction because the alcohol was keeping me in prison and keeping me and in bondage from doing the things that I love to do. And first and foremost, I'm a mom and a grandma, and I'm an athlete. I have been my whole life. And what I found is that I was isolating and spending most of my time by myself and coping with my son's addiction by drinking. And so it wasn't until I finally detached from him and let him go that I realized how sick I was. And it's crazy. I just woke up one morning hungover and was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I'm done. And so I called a friend of mine that I trusted and shared with her what I was struggling with. And she's been walking through it with me ever since. And as a result of that decision, that catapulted me into this place where I'm at now, or to the place where I'm at now, where I have my business and I'm CrossFitting, and I've taken back all of the things that make me who I am.
That's incredible, and congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Walk me through prior to 3.5 years ago. How long did your relationship with alcohol last?
Well, I was a functioning alcoholic for many, many years. I raised 7 children. I had great jobs. I never got in trouble with the law. I was, and it was very cyclical for me, and it was situational. So there would be periods of time where I would drink more than others, and it was mostly when, like, for example, when my dad passed away, my drinking escalated until I got a handle on it. And then I would get a handle on it, and then something else would happen. I went through a divorce, it would escalate. And so I was always a cyclical, situational drinker for many years, probably, I don't know, social drinker up until I was in my early 50s. And so probably for 15 or 20 years, I drank socially and drank as a functioning alcoholic, and always managed to be able to keep it under control, or I thought. And then I just couldn't anymore. I just couldn't. And I wasn't willing to continue down that path, forsaking my responsibility, even though my children are grown, as a mother and as a grandmother. I was giving all of that up and making choices to hide and isolate from the people that I love the most. And that's went against everything that I believe in. So there was always this internal conflict and incongruence, and not being in harmony with who I professed that I was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely makes sense. Was there, when you were growing up, was there alcohol or alcoholism in your family?
There was actually. My dad was a heavy drinker. It was kind of just a natural progression for me. And once it started getting in the way of the things that I loved later in life, then that's when I had to say, okay, what's more important here? And what are you going to do about it?
And when you talk about it getting in the way of things that you love, I know you talked about, de-identifying who you were by isolating and not doing the things that made you you. But was it getting in the way of the things that you love by interfering with your family relationships, friend relationships, love interests? How was that for you?
Well, I was married to an alcoholic. And so when I was married, that was all part of the normal, you know? And then when I went through my divorce and I still continued my pattern, then it was like, aha, this is not normal. And so when I would, for example, I'll give you an example. I would go to work at 4:00. I'm looking at the clock, and I know which little convenience store I'm going to stop on the way home to get my bottle of wine. I'm going to bring it home and I'm going to drink it, and nobody better call me to come over, one of my kids, or hey mom, come over and see one of the grandkids, or can you come babysit, or can you come over for dinner? Don't call me, because I'm going to lie and make up some excuse like, I know I can't, I'm not feeling well, or I'm tired. When in reality, I was choosing alcohol over them, and I wasn't obviously going to drive. And then the next day I'd have a workout planned in the morning. I'd want to get up and go for a run, but of course I'd drank the night before. And so I was hungover, I didn't feel good. So I would get up and just kind of pour myself into work until 4:00 came around, stop at the convenience. It was like the Truman Show.
Describe to me, if you would, the feeling of that. Did you feel almost like automated, like almost on autopilot? Or was there conscious thought that went into it? Was it a decision you could make, or it was just what you were doing?
It was a little bit of both. It would depend on the situation. What I can tell you is that if there was something that interfered with stopping on my way home to grab a bottle of wine, like maybe a work meeting or a family event that was pre-planned, I was full on panic, as in, oh goodness, what am I going to do? Now I have to wait until this is all over with to go do what I normally do. So yeah, probably more automated than anything else. Yeah.
Well, I am so grateful that you, quote unquote, literally woke up one morning and decided this wasn't for you anymore. I'm sure that your family is appreciative that you are healthier and happier, and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. And the most exciting part of the whole thing is shortly after I started my journey, my son started his journey, and he's also been in recovery now for over 3 years. So we almost have the exact same kind of recovery date within a few months of each other. So
Was that pure coincidence?
no, I don't think it was coincidence. I think it was I let him go and I stopped trying to control his behavior and his addiction. And he ended up on homeless on the streets of Seattle, and finally realized that this is what his life was going to look like. And that was the starting of his journey, and mine as well. Letting him go was probably the biggest catalyst for me starting my journey.
I can't imagine that that would be very easy to struggle with your own addiction and then struggle with watching someone that you love be, in your eyes, hurting themselves and being detrimental to their being.
Yeah, it goes against every mama bear instinct that's in me to let him go and to not help him and not try to save him. It was agonizing. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, was to let him go, because it goes against everything, It feels so unnatural, and it felt like I was giving up on him, and what if he died? But I had to. I wasn't helping him, and I certainly wasn't helping me. And so when that happened, then we both got better. It was crazy.
I think that's amazing. And I think that speaks to a lot of what you hear in these types of situations of the codependency, even if it's not recognized by the parties involved as codependency, is there is something there about, well, I'm doing this because you're doing that, and it's justifying my behavior. And I'm sure it worked both ways, even for him. It's like she's, trying to fix me, and I'm going to just go escape here. And then you're like, well, he's doing this, so I'm going to go escape here. And it's this vicious cycle that you don't know how to break, because all you're trying to do is love and help.
That's right. And when you always hear codependents talk about the word detach with love, it's almost an oxymoron. Because if you love somebody, how do you detach from them? And if you detach from them, is or is that not love? That's a hard one to get your head around, detaching with love. Well, it almost sounds cruel.
Right. It almost sounds wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, if I love you, how am I supposed to just watch you do this and be self-destructive? Like, that's terrible, because then it makes me feel terrible.
Yeah, it makes you feel like what I used to call sandpaper. It makes me feel like sandpaper, like it's going against the grain of everything that you intrinsically and instinctually want to do.
Tell me something that would surprise people to know about you.
That I am outwardly, I'm very extroverted, and I am an extrovert, but I'm also very much an introvert. And that has come about as part of my recovery and my healing and my art, is learning is being an introvert. And most people would not see me as being an introvert, and that actually fills my cup.
I would be surprised by that, especially as outgoing as you were in reaching out to me, to do this interview, which is, I'm very grateful for also. How many children do you have?
I have a blended family. I have 4 biological children, and I have 3 bonus children, and a combination of, like I said, 14 grandkids, with a couple more on the way, which I'm super excited about.
Tell me about your business, because you mentioned that in your introduction too.
I did. I have a business called Inspired Life. It's just kind of getting up and off the ground. And it is actually a multi-passionate endeavor for me that sort of encompasses all of the things that have come to fruition because of the decision to get sober. One of them is called, so it's got 3 streams of revenue. It's called, the first one is called Reflections by Roddie, which is my art. And it was a huge part of my healing process. And so that's the first one. And then I have what's called Silver, Strong, and Sassy, which is an apparel line for us silver-haired people. I love it. It's so much fun. I just kind of came up with the idea one day and wanted to represent us older folks at the gym, and it caught on, and there's been a lot of people and a lot of support that have said, hey, I want one of those. So I've got a small little apparel line. And then I'm currently working on my nutrition certification, and I'm going to be hopefully offering some online nutrition coaching after the first of the year. And each one of those sort of represents who I am. And so I love it. And it's all under the umbrella of Inspired Life, which is a lifestyle, a mindset, and an attitude.
Well, I am so inspired.
Well, thank you.
I love all of it. I love the fact that you go to the gym. I love the fact that you themed a clothing line around your persona at the gym. I love the nutrition stuff. I love that you are really taking this journey and embracing it and sharing this way of life and wanting to be a wholer, healthier you. I think that is an incredible thing.
So my art has been in existence about 3.5 to 4 years. And I started, it was just kind of a crazy the way that it happened. I mean, I never had done anything creative ever in my life as far as art is concerned. Drawing a stick person was an epic failure, seriously. And I went through a period of time where I was in between jobs shortly before I decided to get sober, and I had some time. And so during that time, I just started getting back to kind of the things that I loved. And I started doing a lot of hiking and spending time outdoors, which is where I connect. And all of a sudden, God just started downloading stuff into me, and I started putting it on paper, and it started coming to life. And it was like, no matter where I looked, I saw art, and I would put it down really fast and I would come back to it. And I created about 100 pieces in about a year. And then every year also I do a word challenge where I focus on a word for the year. And so, for example, last year my word was renew. And so I make an art piece around that. And so a lot of my friends were saying, oh, my word is this and my word is that. Will you do art around that? So that's sort of how I got it from me and doing it out into the world, was through this one word exercise. And then it just kind of evolved from there. So now I put little messages inside the prints, and sometimes people see them and sometimes they don't. And so that's kind of how it evolved. And then it was just part of my healing. And it's a creative, spiritual practice for me. And so whenever I need to regain balance or kind of get myself centered, I go back to doing art, and it's turned into a business, and I absolutely just love it.
Well, it sounds like it fits exactly in line with your umbrella.
It does.
And okay, so do you have a piece you can share?
Oh, thank you. My art comes from a very intimate place, and so to be able to put it out there, number one, was terribly scary, and number two, the response that I've gotten and the impact that it's had in blessing people has been so incredible. It just makes my heart feel good. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
If you are walking down the street in your community or as you're traveling around and you have the opportunity to hold up a sign that says one thing about Roddie, what would you want people to know about you?
And this probably sounds really cliche, but I would say love.